Bonjour, namaste, shalom. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Balbir Singh, former professor of economics at University of Massachusetts, Lowell. Our conversation today is about Dr. Sihag's very interesting, very provocative book, Kautilya, the true founder of economics. In this book, published by Vitasta, Dr. Sihag argues that Kautilya should be considered the father of economics. Many books have been written about Kautilya or Chanakya, as he was also called, over the years. To my knowledge, this is the first book by an established, well-respected economics professor, to argue that Kautilya is the rightful originator of economics. Dr. Sihag, welcome and thank you for taking the time for our interview today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Wonderful. So let me start with the first question. What's the 30 to 40-second elevator pitch of your book? How would you describe it to someone who has not read it yet or who has not even heard about it before?
There's a theme which Kautilya, of course, followed, that respect comes from power, power comes from prosperity, and prosperity comes from educational system, from development of intellect. So this whole thing is developed in the book, which is, of course, Kautilya's ideas. I'm just articulating that. And some of the things, previous authors, they just took some parts like mandala theory in political science or fiscal policy by Speckler, but they never put together the whole thing. Now, for example, chapter 20, it deals with asymmetrical information and time inconsistency. 2 Nobel Prizes have been given on those 2 topics. Similarly, chapter 15, crime and punishment, administration justice. Professor Becker got a Nobel Prize. Kautilya could have got a Nobel Prize, a 3rd one. And the 4th one, Markovitch, he got the Nobel Prize for risk analysis, mean and variance analysis. Kautilya actually has that. Chapter 19 covers that. And linear income tax, Professor Mirrlees got a Nobel Prize in fiscal policies. Kautilya has that. That's at chapter 12 in the book. So this covers the whole range of topics. And of course, management, economic policies. So that way it's a different book. And my only concern was that I'm really doing justice to Kautilya's ideas or not. So there are 2 parts to it. One part is chapter 3 just takes care of the title of the book, that why Kautilya should be the founder. Women don't like the word father, they like the word founder. So that's why I changed to the founder. So that's the first part. Yeah. So that's the first part, just chapter 3. And the other chapters are simply that how India can benefit, because what Chanakya and Chandragupta Maurya inherited, that was a poor economy, a corrupt economy. And we inherited a poor economy in 1947. How India can develop, not by copying Adam Smith or Western thinking, but by following our own ancient thoughts. So Kautilya is really one of those leading thinkers. So if we follow our Shastra, we can really progress, not by imitating Adam Smith or others. So that's the whole book.
But in the book, the ideas you describe are not just for the Indian economy, right? You are arguing that Kautilya is the father of economics globally.
Economics, there are 2 parts to it. One is the basic tools of analysis, which are common to Adam Smith and Kautilya. What is different, Kautilya's economics or Western economics, that is just on self-interest. The motivation is promoting self-interest. Kautilya is believed in shared prosperity, that ethics should be the basis. For example, rule of law, that's important. Adam Smith also talked about that. That reduces the risk when you have rule of law. But how to promote that, any kind of activity, then you need good governance, and that increases the rate of return. So Kautilya talks about both of them. But then he adds to that, that unless those who decide things, unless they are ethical, all those 2 things will not really be at the optimal level. So
Yeah,
that's where the ethics comes in.
We'll talk about ethics in a few minutes, but in the book, you describe this very interesting story of how your interest in Kautilya started with Paul Samuelson. So could you recount that story for our audience?
Yes. Everybody hear about Kautilya, but people really don't think how serious the book was. And I was one of them. So my father-in-law had given me a book because I used to teach history of economic thought at U Lowell. And I don't know how I got the second book. So I had a sabbatical and I started rearranging my books. I have hundreds of books. And I realized that I've got two copies. So right away I thought, let me give one to my professor Samuelson. I had taken his course on history of economic thought at MIT. So I went to his office. It was quite late, maybe 7 o'clock. He was the only one in the whole department. And he was retired many years ago. And his secretary had gone home, so I could access him right away. So I offered him the copy, and he just glanced over and asked a question that does it have opportunity cost? I have not read the book. So I felt so embarrassed. So I told him that I'll get back to you. I don't know right now. So I hardly could reach home. And when I started reading, and then I said, wow, it has not just opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is simply, instead of listening to me, what else you could have done, what you are giving up. And Kautilya has many examples of that all through the book. And also that proves one point, because Western thinkers, they think that it was written by several people. Now, Adam Smith, just one author, is never consistent. He writes one thing at one place, another place. Now, how Kautilya could be consistent throughout? So he was just one person. Opportunity cost throughout the, whether it was army, related to army, or law and order, or just economic administration. Everywhere the same concept is carried out.
And do you agree with Professor Samuelson that opportunity cost is the main concept in economics?
Yeah, that's very important. The whole economics is basically on opportunity cost. When you compare the alternatives, that's a choice theory. That unless you compare the opportunity cost, you cannot decide anything. Yes.
Okay. Now, what's the 3 to 4 things about this book that you want people to learn?
Not just 3, 4 things, many things. Let me. First of all, this is one of the chapters, chapter 10. Yeah, that's the book. There, I write there, that's all Kautilya's idea. These are not my ideas. Also, let me clarify one more thing. Sure, my name is there on the book, okay? But the first thing I learned from Kautilya was that if you have ego, that really interferes in your learning. You don't listen to others. You think you know everything. So I approached so many people. Professor Solo, and of course, Professor Bhagwati was all along. He read all the chapters of my book. And particularly when you read the chapter on international trade, chapter 14, he wrote it because I cannot write that kind of good English, what he can write. So he wrote that chapter. And similarly, on chapter 6, Dr. Ravi Prakash Arya, he was very helpful, instrumental in writing chapter 6. And Professor Louis Haddad from Australia, he was the motivation for writing chapter 3. When I said that I want to show that Kautilya was the founder of economics, he said it's a tall order. You have to fight hundreds of thousands of economists. So are you ready? And he really provided a framework that if you can show all these things, then you are correct in claiming that thing. And that really is a departure from the other work. Like if you go even in a temple in Delhi, they write that Kautilya is the founder of economics. But how you justify that? That's what I did in chapter 3. That you got to show whatever you claim. There was not a single book which proved that Kautilya should be the founder of economics. So that was in chapter 3 alone. That's more than enough for that purpose. But chapter 6 is the critical chapter for Dharmanomics. because that connects our Vedic literature to the current situation, because that's the transition. Because some Western, they claim that Kautilya, he met Alexander and he learned everything in 2 hours about the Greek philosophy and economics and everything. So that gave me an idea. When I gave my chapter 3 to a Westerner, I thought he was very liberal, Professor Waterman, and he got furious and wrote nasty letters to me in the answer. So that struck me that Kautilya wrote this book in 4th century BC, and Adam Smith is writing in 1776. In 2000 years, it's impossible that those ideas didn't travel to Europe. And Kautilya could learn in 2 hours everything the Greek had to say, and the Western could not learn in 2000 years. Then I started exploring that idea, and that my paper, that Kautilya's Arthashastra, is a recognizable source of the wealth of nations. Yes, this is now one of the chapters in the book. So that really broadened the whole spectrum. So now this is really not a good question to ask, that who should be the father of economics, because Adam Smith borrowed from him, Machiavelli borrowed from him, Fibonacci borrowed from him, because the House of Wisdom in Iraq, they translated our Indian literature into Arabic, and from Arabic it was translated into other languages. So Fibonacci had access to Kautilya's ideas. Machiavelli had ideas from Arthashastra, and Adam Smith, he followed Machiavelli to the point. On national security, there's not a single line he adds which is not there in Machiavelli. So I said all those things. And how you find out? Adam Smith did not know about the deadweight loss. Okay, Kautilya did not know the deadweight loss, that there are distortions when you introduce taxes. Okay, so what they said, Kautilya said that monopolists, they suppress the public, they oppress it, the right word, oppress. And Adam Smith uses the same word, precisely same. And then similarly, Machiavelli, he follows Chanakya or Kautilya. He says that if you don't like someone, give him the tax collection job. People will be so angry and they will take care of him. So Machiavelli follows the same thing, which Kautilya wrote at that time. So that's how you find out that really they copied from him, because there is no other source. And similarly, Keynes, in 1880s, there was a famine in Lucknow, and the Nawab there, he will hire people to build a place. And then at night, the nobles, they don't want to work during the daytime, so he will hire them to demolish part of it. And this is what Kautilya, Keynes said in his macroeconomics book, that that's how you create jobs. Ask them to dig the wells and then ask them to fill the back. That's how you create demand. So Keynes was working for the Indian office, and he borrowed that idea from there, because there is no other example in the whole world that you dig the well and then fill it. So they have been borrowing from that. And Professor C.K. Raju, Chandrakant Raju, he has proven that 17th century Newton did not develop calculus. They borrowed from our sources.
So yeah, John Maynard Keynes is famous for the example you just talked about. But let me move this forward. We'll come to.
Oh yeah, I did not answer all of your questions. Sorry, I get carried away. So the first part was that market failure is bad, but government failure is worse. But the moral failure is the worst, because both those two failures depend on the morality. If there's a decay in the morality, nothing will come out. So that is one of the things which Kautilya mentioned. Then we talk about distortion. We compare taxes, income tax, to the toll tax. So that's not a correct comparison, because what Kautilya introduced, he did not know about the distortion to that extent, but he talks about distortion. That if, like, Ambani and Dr. Siag pay the same amount of taxes, people resent that. So that kind of tax is not a good idea. It will create a lot of disruption. So worry about the disruption part also. If the tax system is not fair, people will revolt. Then boundary rationality. Professor Simon got a Nobel Prize. Kautilya has really more detail than him, that how to overcome boundary rationality. One human being, the mind is limited, cannot decide everything. How you take care of that part. So chapter 10 deals with that. Then another, regulation versus supervision. In economics and also in management, we talk about that expected return is a good thing, more the better, higher the better, and risk is a bad thing. Or generally we talk about good things, more the better. What about if there are two bad things? How we decide that? Like regulation and supervision, banks don't like it. Both are bad. What should be the government policy? So one of my chapters in the second book that deals with this part, Kautilya had a different example about should you, before Kautilya, the punishment used to be penance, that you fast, you do charitable work, other community service. Kautilya introduced that also you put a fine, a penalty. So how you balance, both are bad, but how you balance that? So I wrote this paper, this is now in chapter 16, tort law, sent to Professor Posner, who was dealing with monopoly power of Microsoft. I just, out of fun, I just sent him. And within 3 days, he wrote back. That is a fantastic paper. Because lawyers don't like that part. And that's one of the chapters now in the book. So these are all original ideas, Kautilya's ideas. I'm just articulating. My contribution is very limited.
Dr. Sehag, you are a very humble person, but let me ask you this. This idea that Kautilya, not Adam Smith, not David Ricardo, not John Maynard Keynes, should be considered the founder of economics. What are the implications of this argument for economics teaching and research?
Implications are very deep, but the profession is not willing to move on. Whenever there is something different and whatever they are used to it, it doesn't reconcile with the brain. Brain doesn't want to accept that new change, but it takes time. Like this whole structure of microeconomics, that whole structure is built up. It's not easy to break that. But if we break that somehow, the whole world could be better off, because Kautilya believed in shared prosperity. Okay, with Adam Smith, you cannot get that shared prosperity. There will be a lot of inequalities, and also growth will be suboptimal, because without the ethics, people, they just follow their own interests. They don't worry about the whole society. So it will take time. But I'm sure ultimately, with your effort to spread the word, and there are now a lot of other researchers which are coming along, things might change. Another thing, like people do MA in economics, they have absolutely no idea about the real world. Kautilya starts from a problem and how to find a solution. That's the difference. It's not there. But they talk about a lot of things in economics, and they really, until you start your PhD work, you don't get into the solution part. So this thing cut down all those other unnecessary things. Now, I took Indian Economic Service, my own example, and I had not seen any syllabus of Indian Economic Service. but I had paid 48 rupees at that time. And I just, well, let me have some experience of the Indian Economic Service, what kind of exam. I had not looked at the syllabus. And to my surprise or shock, I got selected. I couldn't believe that. Now, a lot of kids, they write to me that we want your input. How should we prepare for Indian Economic Service? So I had to look at the syllabus. And I was shocked. Our syllabus has not changed since 1858. Can you believe that? Our educational system has not changed for the last 150 years or 70 years. So I was shocked because we asked questions in Indian Economic Service about the history of economic thought of the Britishers. That has absolutely no relevance. I was in government service for 5 years. I never ever used those kind of things. What we need is our own thinking, our own values, and then move on. There's plenty. If you read chapter 8 in my first book, or chapter 2 in the second book, that how prosperity comes. There's, the whole thing is mentioned in detail. And if you read the Arthashastra, sure, you don't get that kind of organized thing. But otherwise, all these ideas from the book, I'm not creating any.
So
actually, that's how, one more thing. When I first wrote my paper, I did not use any quotes from the book. So the referee said you are just making it up. So now I have to write that this is what Kautilya said and this is what it means. Yeah, go on.
So Dr. Suhag, one of the very provocative theses in this book is the idea that Kautilya introduced dharmonymics, marrying economics with ethics. Can you elaborate this for our audience? Because a lot of people think of Kautilya more as a Machiavellian thinker. But you are arguing that he was a very ethics and economics. Could you talk about that?
They want to show the Westerns that Kautilya was not any better than Machiavelli. Okay, that idea is very limited, whether it's Henry Kissinger or Max Weller or others. Okay, they focus on that very, very small, tiny part. But Kautilya is a lot bigger. He's talking about economic administration, how the economic administration could be efficient. Unless it's ethical, it will not be efficient. That is the bottom line. So efficiency requires ethics, because if those who decide the policies and how to implement that, if they are not honest, they will write in their own way. The lobbyists, they will intervene. It will never be optimal. It will never serve the public. So this is what Kautilya said. He starts with what we call backward induction, that what the country needs, prosperity and shared prosperity. Okay, for shared prosperity, what you need? You need the inputs. You need more manpower, you need more land, you need more capital. Okay, so he identifies those factors. Then he goes to the next step, that how to increase them. Then he talks about what are the relevant factors for that. And then he says rate of return and risk. Now, okay, so the fourth step, how do you reduce risk? Then he talks about the rule of law and order, okay, that reduces risk. Because if you earn all day and someone comes with a gun and takes it away, why would you work? Like in Afghanistan or in Yemen, those kind of places. So rule of law is very important. Okay, how about the rate of return? He said there he defines the good governance. Good governance means sound economic policies, okay, and their implementation, infrastructure, all those things, and of course taking care of the public. So that comes under good governance. That raises the rate of interest. Okay, so he puts the background. All right, then he comes to the next step, that how to make sure that there are good policies and there is rule of law. And that's where he defines his Raja Rishi, that unless the king is like a rishi who really takes care of the public, not just his own needs. So that's where the ethics comes in. And if there is not a Raja Rishi, if there is a Machiavelli type person, then both of those other things will not come out. So that's where the ethics comes in. So that's why it's a dharmanomics.
So would it be correct to say, and I just want to make sure that I sum it up for our audience, that Kautilya was not anywhere like Machiavellian, but he was very ethical in his treatment of economics.
Yes, let me read from my book some paragraphs. This is the second book. This is on page 110, that's chapter 8. Kautilya's approach. It is people-centric. In the happiness of the subject lies his happiness. In their welfare, his welfare. Okay, he goes on like that. Now, Machiavelli's approach, king-centric. That do all the harm you must at once and the same time. He's not talking about welfare of the people. He's talking about just the king, how a roving king, a temporary king, how he should secure his position as a permanent king. And Kautilya was a kingmaker. He was looking for a job. So the whole idea is very different. And then goes on. Kautilya says, whenever danger threatens, the king shall protect all those afflicted like a father. And Machiavelli says, above all, do not be upset if you are supposed to have those vices. So there is really no comparison. There's a whole page which goes on and on, making distinctions. So, and even on national security, Machiavelli is just a very small thing. He has absolutely no idea how you secure a nation. Kautilya, all those three chapters, chapters 18, 19, 20, they deal with a whole idea of how to secure the country and why it is so important. Because if you don't have freedom, then you don't have your own welfare. Prosperity depends. Unless you are a free nation, you can never prosper. And we have experience of that. That is one of his key statements.
Dr. Sihag, on page 6 of the book, you mentioned Kautilya's position on taxation, the 3 principles of taxation. Could you tell our audience about those 3 principles of taxation?
This is Spengler. He wrote those pages because he's limited only to the tax policies. I wish you could have done something else. And those are pretty good. So wherever I find something good, I would mention that. But Professor Henry Kissinger and others, they are there just to nitpick only those aspects. If a country doesn't have freedom, if it is not independent, prosperity could never come. And Kautilya made sure that we never lose our freedom. Because in the Vedas, they talk about freedom for its own sake, that you cannot prosper mentally, physically, emotionally, unless you are a free person. Okay, so Kautilya says that you need not just to feel good, but also you need for prosperity. So let me read those pages, but Kautilya is a lot more than that. Yeah, these are the few lines on taxation. Professor Spengler, he remarks, Kautilya's discussion of taxation and expenditure, apparently in keeping with the traditional doctrine, gave expression to 3 Indian principles. Taxation power is limited. Government cannot just raise up to 100%. Taxation should not be felt to be heavy or excessive. And Kautilya mentions that if you have too much of a tax, then very little will be left for the private person to invest. So that will kill really the goose. Tax increases should be graduated. So there should be progression. And Kautilya has that if you are a goldsmith, you pay 50 pannas. If you are a woodworker, you pay only 10 pannas. So there is a gradation there also. So all these 3 principles.
So the idea of progressive taxation
Yeah, it's
exists
there.
in Kautilya.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So the next question I have is, in the book, you discuss that Kautilya talks about three policies: economic policies, judicial policies, and foreign affairs policies.
Yeah.
Your book focuses on the first. It also mentions the second. Do you think other authors have elaborated on judicial policies, foreign affairs policies, or do you think that work still remains to be done?
Yeah, that should be done. Like chapter 15, I have 3 chapters on that in the book. That's on administration of justice. And that's where crime and punishment comes in. And also what Kautilya has unique insight into that how to minimize the legal errors. But sometimes we send an innocent person to jail, other times really a guilty person walks on the street. How you minimize those 2 errors? And Kautilya has a unique answer, creating more and more information. And also, if the prosecutor is biased, throw him out. So there's a whole chapter dealing with all aspects of how to make sure whether it's a king's son or a foreigner, you treat them equally. So all those kind of principles are there. And also, he doesn't know the calculus, but he says it should not be too little and should not be too extreme. Should be somewhere in the middle. So it kind of optimum idea is also there, implicit in that chapter. So
Dr.
3
Sihag,
chapters, yeah.
the book talks about all these interesting things, right? And you obviously spent a lot of time writing the book. And you also mentioned in the call today that many chapters of the book are written by other people, like Dr. Bhagwati wrote chapter 14 on international trade. So the book sort of brings out all these interesting things. What was the reception to the book by the economics establishment when the book came out?
Some of them, there are 2 extremes really. There's nothing in between. Some, they love it, they admire it. Others, they just ignore it. If it is a history of economic society here in America, they didn't like what I was saying because they are all wedded to Adam Smith. Okay, even intellectually, they say that it is correct, but their job depends on that. So they will not go away from that. Now, there are some who get very excited. I got a lot of mail and that I read your paper and all kind of good comments. So in private, they are different. But when it comes to the conferences and all that, they are so used to promoting Adam Smith. It's not easy to get away from that. So we did sell out the first batch, which was printed, and now the reprints are there. But it could be a lot more because everybody can benefit from it. But they're really not experimenting with new things. That comes in the way.
And how long did it take you to write the book?
Well, it's an interesting story. After Professor Samuelson's talk that does it have opportunity cost, I wrote a paper and sent it to various journals. Nobody will accept it. I almost gave it up. And then one day, suddenly, because I used to teach Adam Smith, I used to teach Ricardo. And Ricardo, for example, never used indifference curves or isoquants, but we use them to articulate his ideas. So that hit me one day. Well, if they can use for Adam Smith, who never have a single equation, Ricardo has not a single equation, not a single graph. If we can use them for that, why not for Kautilya? So that hit me right away. And I was in business. I had all the ideas, the economic tools, and I read the Kautilya's Arthashastra. So in a year, I wrote almost 15, 16 chapters. And then I showed to Professor Bhagwati, and he said, wow. He recommended to Oxford University Press. Okay, so they were also excited in the beginning, and then they sent it to a reviewer to England. And the reviewer said that you got to change the title of the book. That how can there be an economist in 4th century BC and that too in India? So he said he was bent upon. And then you got to say something like this, that Kautilya was great, but Adam Smith was greater. Now listen, I am already a professor and tenured professor. I don't need publication. I have several other publications. Okay, this is not going to make my life any different. So I'm not going to tell a lie. So I withdrew the book from that. And then my stubbornness and my wife's smartness, that came into the picture. My wife said that if you give a heavy dose to a patient, the patient will die. Well, what do you mean? She said that you portion out these chapters into different articles, different pieces. Give 1 or 2 ideas at a time. Okay, and that will then put into a book. And that's what I did. So like first article was on accounting, and the accounting professor was very helpful, and it got published. Then I sent to the history of political economy, that's the top in the history of economic thought. And there I got it published. And then people started asking actually that contribute something to our journal. So when people knew me in this field and Kautilya, and then Professor Bhagwati and others, they suggested, now you can put in a book and get it published. But foreign companies, whether they are in India, they will not publish if I challenge Adam Smith. So thanks to Renuji, the Vitasta publisher, they could publish whatever I wanted to publish, not that they will delete any line or anything. And that's why I went with them. And they have been very nice. They designed the cover page. It's really excellent, like this white line. It indicates the purity of thought. The key to the knowledge, yes, this line, this purity of thought, really, truth. That's our Indian culture. And the key, of course, to the knowledge. So they really worked hard on that. And being a small publisher, like I saw a sign in Delhi behind a scooter, no prachar, no vapar. So unless you advertise, it's very difficult. And these small publishers, they don't have that kind of budget. And like if you are Oxford University Press, 1,000 copies are sold right away because they have the market and people think that it must be good. Even if they criticize India, still they will publish it. So that doesn't happen with the small publishers. So we should really take care of them, not the authors, but the publisher, the small publisher. They need more help than the authors.
So Dr. Sihag, you are a retired professor now.
Yeah.
What role do you see of young economists in popularizing Kautilya's ideas on economics and spreading this idea that Kautilya was the founder of economics? What role do you see for young economists?
Young people, they have, our future depends on them. They are the key to our success. One of my articles now will be coming in a book in philosophy. Can you imagine that? So a philosopher asked me to write something on Kautilya from the philosophical point of view. And I wrote for him. The article will come this year sometimes. It's coming by Belgrave. Hard to believe that. And there I talk about that we have an ethical deficit in our country, throughout the world, but I'm worried about India right now. And what does that mean? That leads to trust deficit. Because if people are not truthful, if they're not honest, who will trust them? Okay, like in India, the milkman is very happy by adding water. Okay, then he sells to a doctor. When this person falls sick, goes to the doctor, doctor gives only half the injection. Neither he lives nor he survives. I mean, nor he dies. So in India, by cheating each other, India can never become great. That's one of the ideas of Kautilya. And young people, they can carry it forward. The approach right now, if that guy is corrupt, how can I deal with that? I have to be corrupt. No, you decide for yourself and others will also decide for themselves. So the whole momentum will start. And that starts with the young people. That's very important.
So Dr. Sihag, do you think that young economists today who are doing their PhD, who've done their PhD, they are learning about Kautilya in their education?
Now they are introducing that. Yes, I'm very glad to know that. But initially, whenever they'll invite me for a lecture, what was the approach? They will invite me, but then they will right away say that we cannot pay your travel expenses or other expenses. They call Americans, Europeans, they pay everything, but they discriminate when it comes to the Indian thought. That's not right. And the young people, they are not in power, but when they come in power, it's a matter of time, they should make sure that they promote our culture, our ideas, because they are more suitable to our thinking, our mindset.
Okay. So at this time, let me remind the audience that we welcome questions from people in the audience. You can either raise your hand using Zoom, or you can type your question in the chat box and we will take questions from the audience if you have any. So please feel free to ask questions. Dr. Sehag, let me ask you this. As a writer, and I know you're a professor, so you write for a living, but as a writer who writes books, were there any writers who inspired you? Were there any scholars who inspired you in the writing?
Yeah, Professor Bhagwati. Yeah, he was all along with me, really very inspiring. Professor T. N. Srinivasan, he was a big help and he wrote a foreword to my book. And of course, Dr. Manmohan Singh. Usually, you need a father and a godfather. I have been very lucky to have three godfathers, Dr. Professor Bhagwati, Professor T. N. Srinivasan, and Professor Manmohan Singh, all along. Professor Manmohan Singh, he was my professor at MA at Chandigarh. So I've known him since 1964. And whenever I go to India, I visit him every time I go.
Okay. We have a question from Dr. Asra Khan from Amity University. Dr. Khan, do you want to ask your question?
Yes. Am I audible?
Yes, please turn on the video and ask your question.
Okay. Hello. I'm Asra. I'm Asra Khan from Amity University. So my question to you is: do you think that we should remove the modern economic theories and should totally depend upon the Arthashastra for the economic structure of a country?
Dr. Sehag, did you get the question?
You can repeat once more.
The question
Yeah,
is
sure, sir.
the
Yeah.
question that Asra is asking is: do you think we should remove modern economic texts and totally depend
Theories
on
and should totally depend on the Arthashastra
Yes,
for the
there are
economic
two.
structure?
Yes, there are two parts to it. One part is the concepts. Like in economics, we have in different curves, isoquants, all those kind of things. Those are common to Kautilya's economics and also to modern economics. What is the difference is the ethics part. So we have to change that part, because right now we talk about maximization of utility, maximization of profit, or minimization of cost, all those kind of things. But we forget about the ethics part. So that without ethics, economy is not really creates a lot of inequalities, and also the growth is suboptimal. So we should change our structure and make it. Why we need this kind of strategy of macroeconomics? What is the purpose of economics? To help people, to promote growth for everybody, not just for a few. Now we have like oligarchs in India also, not they're just in Europe. Okay, they're India also. We will, if we have Kautilyan economics, we will not have that kind of situation. It will be for everybody. Poverty is removed for everybody. Okay, so that's why we need a different kind of structure, are based on our own values, not the borrowed values. A lot of universities in Delhi, other places I go to, they feel proud that we are cooperating with or have a common program with some European or American university. Americans are not interested in promoting India. They are interested in promoting their own country. Okay, we should be very clear. So what they are trying to do through our education system, they are exporting their values to India so that they always dominate. We got to change that mindset. We got to change our system. Yes.
Wonderful. And I think
Thank you
Dr.
so much, sir.
Balbir Singh has a very interesting question. Balbir Singh, do you want to ask your question on camera?
Hello, sir.
Please turn on the video and ask your question.
So my video is not functional right now. Can I just
Yeah, go
ask
ahead.
my question?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. I just wanted to ask that Kautilya used the Vedic Shastras to give general guidelines on economics. But at the lives of Adam Smith actually propounded theories, used logic and maths and all those stuff. They were very rigorous. So how do you account for that? I mean, how do you just, I mean, to say someone as a father of economics, you need to first define economics. What do you mean by economics? You can't just say that somebody is giving general guidelines which are good for the society and which do make economic sense. Then how do you just make him the father of economics? I just wanted to know. Thank you for the opportunity.
Dr. Sehag, you got the question?
No, I.
So
it
let
was
me explain
lot
the
of-
question.
yeah.
He
Yeah.
says, his argument, Dr. Balbir Singh says that Kautilya, in his view, gave general guidelines, while Adam Smith proposed full-fledged theories of economics. So how do you rightly claim that, how do you claim that Kautilya was the founder of economics when he only gave general guidelines?
No, Adam Smith did not propose a comprehensive economic system. Okay, he compared the economic system to a machine. Okay, that's not how economy works. In the real economy, there are people and they have moral hazard problem, how you negotiate with each other. A machine doesn't negotiate the different parts with each other. That's a wrong model to start with. Okay, so Kautilya has, there are people and there are things. Adam Smith just talks about things, not about people. People have motivation, how you motivate them, how you make sure that they behave properly. So Adam Smith doesn't have that concept. Even today, Western economy doesn't have that concept. Adam Smith doesn't have foresight. Okay, if there is a foresight, most of the Americans they follow, there will not be the 2008 financial crisis because there is a lack of foresight. That's why I wrote that paper, one of the paper in the book. Oversight, foresight, and ethics. How you make sure that the economic system doesn't crash like that. So Kautilya has a better system than Adam Smith. Adam Smith doesn't have, he talks about that justice is the pillar on which the whole edifice stands, but he doesn't define justice. Not a single line, not a single word on justice. What justice means. Kautilya says that justice, sure, it's like a pillar, but where the pillar should stand on ethics. If the base is not good, how the pillar will stand and how you construct that pillar with ethics, brick and mortar of ethics. Adam Smith has no clue about that. And on national security, absolutely nothing. He just follows Machiavelli, which is very little. So he doesn't have a system. How
Wonderful.
Yes, how his system interacts, nothing.
Thank you.
So
Abhinav,
this is a framework they're trying to create, but there is no system. Yeah.
great. Thank you. Abhinav Kumar Singh, you have a question, sir?
Yes, sir, I have a question, sir.
Please go ahead.
Sir, hello, sir. This is Avinav Kumar Singh from
Yeah,
BBA
yeah.
from University Patna. So my question to you is that, according to you, what was the Kautilya's view of economics, sir? How he sees economics? What was according to him? What was economics importance of economics and all?
Professor Gupta, can you repeat that again?
Yeah, the question is, in your understanding, what was Kautilya's view of economics? I think he's getting to this idea that, you know, how economics is often defined as the dismal science by many Western economists. How did Kautilya see economics? What did he see as the role of economics?
Oh, very important, because he's talking about prosperity. And prosperity comes, of course, that's the main topic of economics. And if you don't have prosperity, let us start from the beginning, as I said in the beginning, that respect comes from prosperity. And prosperity comes from good education. So unless you have good policies, and that's what he's planning. That's how he started. because Kautilya and Chandragupta Maurya, they inherited a poor economy, a corrupt economy. And his goal was that what kind of economics we need to move that to a different stage, a prosperous stage, a secure economy, a secular economy. So that was the whole idea. And that's what Kautilya throughout his book, he tries to promote that. But also keeping in mind always that never break the ethical rules. Because if you start breaking, then very quickly it will be a chaos. Everybody will be unethical. They will try to cheat each other. So
Dr. Suhag,
role.
I have to admit that for me as a management professor, the most important takeaway from your book was this idea that Kautilya focused a lot on ethics, because that's not what you often hear from people. Even when they're writing about Kautilya, they ignore that part. So that was a big takeaway for me. Now, when you were doing your research on Kautilya, was there any surprising things that you thought, oh, I had not expected this?
Yeah, a lot of them. Actually, so many of them. Like I gave a seminar, a conference paper many years ago on management. I don't know why they invited me, but I went there. And then I realized, like you are a professor of management, in the 70s, computers came and everybody was talking about data management. That was the key to success of a business. Very quickly, they realized that data is nothing, that's a dearranged things. So how about information? So then information became the key to management, managing the information. Well, information was also not good enough. What do you do with the information? So you need knowledge. So in the 80s and 90s, it became knowledge management. Okay, but what I added was that actually all these three things are subset of wisdom, management by wisdom. And that was a key concept which everybody in the conference appreciated that. There were hundreds, several hundred people, big conference. So management by wisdom is the key to success of a business, because wisdom means foresight, insight, farsight, all those good judgment, that comes from wisdom. And for our viewers' information, the first chapter in Kautilya's author is on wisdom. Wisdom is even more important, Kautilya thought, than ethics, because wisdom is foresight, farsight, insight, everything. Like they changed in the 90s, Clinton time, the law which was there, Glass-Steagall Act. I gave an example of that, that one driver, his car fell into a ditch, and he complained to the town that why they don't put a sign here so that people become cautious. Well, that reached to the mayor of the city, and he said that we had a sign here for 20 years, nobody fell. So we thought, why replace it? That's lack of insight. And that's what happened in 2008, because they removed all the regulations which were there. So this is the meaning of, so the first chapter is just like a contents. So that's really not the first chapter, not chapter. The second chapter is really the first chapter, and that is on wisdom. And the second chapter on that is on ethics, Dharma Shastras. Only third comes economics and political science.
Okay.
So he ranked them. Yeah.
So Dr. Suhag, today we discussed this book, Kautilya, the true founder of economics. But you have a second book on Kautilya also.
Yeah.
Why did you feel the need to write the second book?
Second book, I don't work unless there is a challenge. And one challenge came that Adam Smith didn't borrow anything from Adam Smith. So I had to write a paper on that. Another, a friend sent Henry Kissinger some statements, he comparing Machiavelli to Kautilya. So I write a chapter. So that's chapter 8 in the book. Then someone compared Confucius to Adam Smith. And I had to write that, correct that. So I compared Chanakya or Kautilya to Confucius, that both were ethical. And they're far, far apart than Adam Smith. Adam Smith has no idea about ethics. Okay, so I write to that chapter. And then by writing all those things, I realized that an ounce of ethics is better than a ton of laws. So that is actually the first chapter in the book. And then someone claimed origin of statistics. So I had to challenge that also. So there's one chapter on that. Actually, Arthashastra is the source of statistics, the first one, origin of statistics. Then someone wrote a book on mathematical origin, origin of mathematical economics. So I had to really correct that also. So that's another chapter. So likewise, the second book came up.
Wonderful. We have a question from Anushka Sinha that I think is very relevant. Her question is, do you think Arthashastra, the book that Kautilya wrote, was put to use in the subsequent centuries by the Indian rulers, government, states?
There's a mention, but interestingly, it was used in Indonesia. Indonesia king in the 11th century or 10th century, he writes about it, that I could overpower my enemies by following the Arthashastra. So it has been around. But in India, the whole system is still the same what we had during Kautilya's time. The income tax system, the collection system, everything is really just like before. But they don't in an explicit way, they don't say that, but we do follow that implicitly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Sehag, we are almost out of time, so I'll ask the last two questions and then we will call it a day. We only have 2 minutes left. What books are you reading these days? Any interesting economics books that you're reading that you would recommend for our listeners?
Not economics, but
Okay.
this is one book by Chandrakant Raju. This is Euclid and Jesus. And what he proves in a very convincing way that there was no Euclid. They just create stories about Euclid. Okay, this is very, very deep book, encyclopedic book. So I have read that and used it also. And the second book, this is a philosopher, Ethics in the Mahabharata. We should forget about Aristotle. Okay, his ideas were really like empty vessels. He never provides any content. And Berserker-san and others, they try to fill in. But he had absolutely nothing. His ideas were circular. Okay, never any content in anything. And that's why Adam Smith couldn't write anything about ethics, because he couldn't borrow from Aristotle, because Aristotle is empty. Yeah.
So just so I understand you correctly, you said we should forget Aristotle in terms of talking about ethics, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Someone who is so racist, who believes in the slave theory, how can you think that he can write about ethics?
Okay. We have a question from, I think Shivanshi is Dr. Vivekanand Pandey's daughter. So Shivanshi, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Sure.
Yes, for sure. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's 7:30 right now.
Yes. Go ahead, Shivanshi.
Yeah, go ahead.
With
Yeah.
this whole point of view that you've given right now, this different perspective of Kautilya that you've given, what we've got to know that Kautilya is exactly the main father of economics. Because as a student of Notre Dame Academy, I'm studying class 9th right now, and what we've got to know is that Adam Smith is the main father of economics. As a reader who has had a glimpse of this book, my question to you is that in this book, you've stated that it is possible to know even the path of the birds flying in the sky, but not the ways of government servants who hide their dishonest income. As in Kautilya's Arthashastra, part 283. As a reader who has not exactly read Kautilya's Arthashastra and is willing to read it, the question main is, what exactly does Kautilya's Arthashastra aim on? The religious policy of the Mauryan Empire, the wealth accumulation of Chandragupta Maurya, or the principles of the statecraft?
Very good. I like those kind of questions. Kautilya makes a distinction that ethics is one thing and religion is another thing. He was not a religious person. He didn't believe in heaven and hell, but he believed in ethics. And a lot of people, they confuse Even our constitution confuses that distinction. They abolished all ethical teaching from our constitution, just like the Americans. We just followed the Western style that everything is law. Kautilya is not for that. He says Kautilya is the father of secular law. Even Dr. Ambedkar said that. Okay, so he created the law, but not as a substitute for ethics, as a complement to ethics. That suppose 90% of the people are ethical and 10% people are unethical. How you control those unethical people? You need law. Okay, so it was just for that purpose, not to just get rid of the ethics part. So our government doesn't understand that. They want to bring the Vedic culture, ethical culture, but ethics is by persuasion, not by force. That's the bottom line. Okay, that you try to convince somebody that truth is very important, not by forcing on people. Okay, that's totally anti-Vedic culture. Vedic culture is tolerance, that even if you have a different viewpoint, you are welcome, because that adds to the debate. You see different perspectives. Okay, so people mix that up.
And Dr. Suhag, what I take from your answers today is your quote, an ounce of ethics is better than a ton of laws. I really
Yes.
like that. And I think that's
Yes.
a good thing to.
This
sort
is
of
the
keep
very
in mind.
first chapter, and this, let me be clear. These are not my ideas. These are Kautilya's ideas. And one thing very important about Kautilya, which I really follow, that ego comes in the way of learning. He said, Kautilya said, learn even from a child. That should be the open-mindedness, that wherever the wisdom comes from, ideas comes from, grab them. Okay, so this is what main theme of Kautilya was.
Wonderful. So Dr. Suhag, now my last question to you. We are already past time. What is the next book that you're working on?
Now, Kautilya is on the world map. There are hardly any country left where Kautilya is not known now. Okay, so that project is really, now it's up to you and these young people, to them to carry on. I want to take another point, another author, like Charak or Charak, his contribution to medicine. So that article I sent to you, that is just a start. He's a physician, but he's talking about philosophy. So that how you can be happy, how you can be sukhi. There's no word like happiness. It looks empty when you look at the word sukhi. When you ask people, are you sukhi? And if the person says yes, that means there's no future worry, no current worry. So that's a very powerful word, a very holistic word. And I wrote that paper on that. And there's another paper which has been submitted to a journal. So I can't talk about that yet at this point. And I'll write several papers on this.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Suhag. Let me remind our viewers that this is the book, and I will be recommending our library here keep a copy of this book.
My honest request is to promote our small publishers. I don't need promotion, but those people, they need promotion.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And
thank you. Thanks for the
truly
opportunity.
appreciate your time.
And in India, we say Ram Ram.
Thank you.
Thank
And thank you to the audience for your patient audience today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day and keep up the good work.
Thank you.